My unpopular opinion is that fund objectives and policies directly drive the fund's growth.
Hi, I'm Wayne, this is Gareth, and this is the Roadmap to 10 Billion podcast. Gareth, you believe that investment objectives and policies drive growth. I don't know what you're talking about. Justify yourself.
Thanks, Wayne. Okay, so, all right. A fund objective, a very simple statement, or it used to be at least, to say exactly what that fund is doing. A couple of sentences, driving growth, driving income, over what time horizon. Those very clear messages get you indoors. Do you qualify? Does your fund qualify for a portfolio? Does it qualify for an advisor's audience and their target market? Does it qualify for the platform's requirements? Those three very simple facts are the things that are going to drive whether you even get in the door, firstly. So that's number one. And if you don't get in the door, you don't get a UM. So for a start off, it's either nothing or something. And then the policy and how you deliver that, and particularly, I think, actually how you articulate that. So, okay, great, we're going to invest this percentage in equities or this percentage in bonds, but we could do a bit of this and we might do a bit of that. Like how you actually say that, recognizing the UK specific rules on how you can describe the ability to maybe use something or the ability that you might do something. There's much more of a drive towards being very, very clear that you will or you won't. So fair enough. But within that and how you describe that, you basically tell the market why your fund is credible and whether you can deliver that outcome in a meaningful way. And so if we think about buying processes for advisors, for platforms, for DFMs, whether the fund can deliver that objective and whether the buyer believes that the fund can deliver that objective will be heavily influenced, I think, by the words that you give them and the way that you frame what that fund does. And so, again, if you can't convince them of that, you aren't in the portfolio. You're not in you're not in that advisor's world. You're not going to be the fact sheet picked out of that briefcase in that particular moment. And then let's look one step further at an advisor sat in front of a client saying, this fund does this, and this is why I think you need to allocate to it as part of your overall portfolio. If that's not a clear message, if it's not got a nice narrative, if it doesn't feel right, advisor's not going to do it. They're not going to recommend it. They're not going to pick it out. They're not even going to mention it. And if they do, maybe the client says, I don't understand. I don't quite feel that that's the right place for my money to go. So being clear on your objective and your policy, I think, directly drives your growth. Let's pause there a moment. What is the roadmap to 10 billion? It's our detailed step-by-step plan on how a fund manager can get their funds from zero AUM all the way to 10 billion.
It builds on years of experience and conversations with professional fund buyers in the UK and combines compliance, portfolio management, sales, marketing, distribution and oversight. To access the roadmap, visit the website 0.1.
All right, unpause, back to the pod.
So I'm going to challenge you a bit on that because you're saying that it drives AUM growth. Mm-hmm. But what you've talked about there to me sounds like a clear objective and policy is a hygiene factor, not a growth factor. So you've got to have it or else you don't have the right to play. But having the right to play isn't the same as winning. So tell me more. Why does that drive AUM growth rather than just give you the right to be on the playing field to begin with?
Well, you've got to give your team a chance. So firstly, you have to be on the playing field to give them that chance. Mm-hmm. Then we're talking about, okay, performance might be in the background. Are you actually able to deliver growth based on that strategy? But of course, the objective and the policy, the heaviest input into the drafting of those probably comes from the portfolio manager, right? What do I want to do as the portfolio manager of this product to deliver an outcome that I think is rational and reasonable? And yeah, you're going to get lawyers like me that come along and spoil it and change it and make you rewrite it and make it longer. But ultimately, it's your vision of this fund. And so to deliver performance, to deliver outcomes, to deliver growth, to make that fund successful, you have to have articulated it first. So I'm saying it's an all or nothing game. It's a zero-sum game. You either get on the playing field to even be able to score goals, or you don't get in the stadium. And so you can't drive success and you can't drive growth, firstly, without being on the pitch, but secondly, without the clarity that allows the portfolio manager to do their job with direction and with purpose and with a known destination in sight.
So I'm gonna take a slightly different angle
Okay.
on that, right? And I'm also going to end the playing field cliches because I feel like we've exhausted those now when you were running a bit short. Yeah, no, I think we've done everything we can on playing field. So my take on that is that the objective of the policy are hygiene factors. Without the right ones, you don't have the right to play. But slightly different to that, I would say that having a clear investment strategy that's been through the lawyer and is longer. The FCA are going to expect that now anyway. If you're a UK fund, right? They don't want longer strategies. They want clearer strategies. It will do this. They want percentages in there, actual percentages. The days of mainly, primarily, majority, well over, right? And they want you to talk about where you can invest. I think the reason that drives growth, it's not quite direct, but is that stops portfolio managers from doing some things more than it allows them. So a lot of portfolio managers, not all, but a lot, want as much freedom as they can have. The risk is if you've got that freedom, then you can do lots of different things and your strategy becomes a little bit less transparent, it's a little bit unclear, you might do something a bit more unexpected. The moment people can do things that are unexpected or aren't clear in there is when you start to fail to sell your ideas to some of these professional buyers because they're not stupid, so they will see right through that. So if you don't have it clear in there already, you're going to have to explain what it is you can and can't do in some other document, which you should have, by the way, which is more detailed, which says, here's my process, here's who's doing those things, here's who's making decisions, here's the quantitative data we use when we make those decisions, here's the risk profiles, the Sharpe ratio, so on and so on, that we look at when we're making those things. And so my take is that, yes, it can drive growth, but only insofar as it prevents people from or reduces the chance of fund buyers from casting your fund aside because it's not quite clear what you do and because it gives them more scope to go off and do some wacky stuff that really shouldn't probably be doing.
Okay. And so, I'm a bridge builder. Let's find that middle ground. That we're both saying, I think, that it's critical. Like, it's very important to the fund. I would probably say it maybe is the only 2 sentences about the fund that some end investors will read. They're not going into your longer strategy. They're certainly not looking at all the risk factors in your prospectus. They might look at the KID and see the objective summarised at the top of that page. So it's fundamental, it's critical, it's really very important. We've spoken a lot, I think, historically about marketing and communication of funds. And we've said, maybe flippantly, but possibly there's a truism here, that anyone can market something if given freedom, complete freedom. And that's, portfolio managers doing anything they want and marketing people being able to say anything they want about that never-ending possibility at the bottom. Great. But actually what really defines or what identifies the best at this is those people that work well within constraint. So if your investment objective is tight, if your investment policy is tight, then yes, you don't have freedom, but you've got clarity, which we have already said in our last episode was very important. And so when you've got that clarity and you've got that direction, then you can sell that thing to someone and they will know what they're buying. And if they know what they're buying, there's a greater likelihood that they'll take that on board and they'll actually commit to the purchase rather than it's a bit vague. And I understand that, these are funds. We're not talking like new trainers or new computer or anything. But actually, knowing why it sits within a risk allocation of your portfolio is probably quite important. Now, you're the kind of consumer duty expert here, and I don't want to labour on consumer duty, but clearly that, coupled with the FCA's thematic work of years before about the need for those policies and objectives to be, if not longer, certainly clearer, although both seem to have gone hand in hand, is it fair to say, then, that the FCA also thinks that objectives and policies are the things most important in driving the sale and therefore the growth of a fund?
So yeah, I think what the need to clarify these objectives and policies did post, it was the asset management market study and first, and then it was consumer duty.
Yeah.
But what it did was bring what was already being looked at by most professional buyers to retail investors. So we've already said before that professional buyers want more detail than just the top line or even the second, third, and fourth paragraph in the investment strategy. So they want more detail about what your process is, what your buy-sell disciplines are, what your risk parameters are, and so on and so forth. They already want to see that. They also want to know how you measure what success is. Now, often that was just, well, this guy gets a bonus or this lady doesn't get a bonus if certain hurdles aren't met, and those hurdles are probably a benchmark. So what the FCA said, well, if that's how you're measuring success, then surely that's how all your investors should also be measuring success. Therefore, the benchmark rules came into force, where you had to say, we're going to beat it, we're going to try and match it, or we're constrained by it. And so I think that the objective and policy and the strategy now, having more words in and being more specific, was always the case for a good period of time before we've seen it change in the last 3 or 4 years, because that's what the bigger buyers wanted. Now it just has to be put into more formal documents in a more standard format.
Okay. And so I'd be interested actually to just look into a bit of this here. At the minute, you can market your fund into the UK from overseas, from Europe, under the OFR, Section 272. You'll have Irish domiciled funds, Lux domiciled funds coming into the market, competing with the UK equivalents. Have you found from experience that the level of detail in the objective policy strategy is the same? Or do the UK-based funds have a slightly greater edge or slightly more clarity in what they've written there than the EEA funds?
The UK managers have been dragged kicking and screaming into a regime that requires more detail for all the reasons we've given. And that's not unusual looking at regulatory change for years and years and years. The FCA has been often at the forefront of creating a gold standard, agree or don't agree, but that's what they call it, of regulation. Now, the EU UCITS funds that we deal with often do not have that level of detail at all in a lot of their product documentation. And in some ways, that sort of gives them a bit of an edge. It's a bit of a benefit to them, so they can still have more flexibility. But then that kind of works to a point, because those bigger buyers, once you start getting up the roadmap into the larger AUMs, you want to be more institutional-like, you're going to have to give more detail anyway. You're going to have to be more specific about how you run the fund and what you buy and sell and how you decide and how you measure success and so on and so forth. So it kind of converges once you get to a decent size and a decent market segment. And so you're going to end up with that level of similarity anyway. So on the face of it, it looks like I've got to do more longer, specific, less freedom-giving strategies than they have to do. Correct. But does that lead to better sales outcomes? I'm not convinced it really does. Not in certain market segments, not in the ones that are going to get you the big AUM anyway.
Okay, that's interesting. And then, so where in your view does that investment strategy piece, the bit beyond the objective and policy, or even the bit that's not in the prospectus but is part of your other marketing materials, that process by which you select, choose and put guardrails around what you buy for the fund, how does that affect, do you think, the buying process of the particular fund that we're talking about?
That gives the clarity,
right?
I think. So if I'm allocating large amounts of money, I'm worried about achieving the outcome I'm trying to achieve within the risk parameter I'm trying to achieve it. So a lot of the assets come in a multi-asset and often risk-rated product range.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to help end retail investors or institutional accounts or pension funds achieve a certain amount of return within a set period of time. So I want to retire in 30 years, therefore I need to take this much risk to get that much return, to get that size of pension pot, so I can retire on what I want. And so the only way you're going to be comfortable that you're going to achieve that kind of thing is if it's clear where the money you're investing, how that's being invested and what kind of things that's doing. Now, within that, there's always space for someone or something to do something with more freedom that's a bit wackier, but it is more niche than the 50p in the pound allocation. That's where you're getting into the super wealthy, the hedge funds, the ones that have got more to lose, longer time horizons, or just have run out of other places to put their money so they can put it in something a little bit riskier.
I am interested in the difference, I suppose, between those approaches in the UK and in Europe to that level of detail in the disclosures of a fund and how they interplay with the fund's viability. It's almost like you sort of look at it from a UK perspective, right? It's almost like the EU is behind, or is like a 2014 version of a fund, whereas the UK fund has to be the 2025, 2026 version of that same thing. But equally, as we said, like there's that restriction that sits with the policy, with the objective, in that more strict UK interpretation of what's allowed and what's not allowed in that kind of authorised fund context. And I am interested actually in how that differentiation plays out, and I think probably we won't see that actually play out for quite a while. Whether because there's a bit of a conversation there, isn't there, around the level playing field that exists between those kind of EU operators and the UK operators, and whether they both do have that level playing field, or whether one has the advantage over the other within one particular market, in the UK here, for instance. So yeah, I'm interested in that generally. I do still stand by the fact that probably that objective and policy wording governs the outcome of the investment, the inflows into a fund. I would say that it's probably the only bit of the fund that I get any control over as the lawyer. Like to write the thing that says what it does. Great. So fair enough, I'm biased in that context, but it does still feel like a very critical part of the overall disclosures that the fund will deliver to any market, whether it's the professional person sat between the manager and the retail, or in fact the retail and end investor themselves.
I think the difference, I don't think the difference makes such a, or the divergence rather, between the regulation in the UK and the EU makes such a material difference, actually. I think when you're in the detail of it, you spot the difference more because you're laser focused on what that rule says versus that rule, or you're looking at how long that is and how restrictive that strategy needs to be versus how much freedom you get from this one over here. But actually, when you're out there selling the thing, running the thing, I would always want to have more freedom than not in legal documents.
Okay.
Because then if it's just in a document that I've written myself, this is how I do the high level thing, then I can change it and chop it around all I want, can't I?
Yeah.
So yeah, of course I'm going to want more freedom there if I'm going to be given it. But really, that's not the thing that's going to get you big AUM particularly, unless your fund's designed to be, super free, go anywhere, in which case you're selling to a different market in any case.
But can you get to supersize without a good objective and policy?
Good question. If I had to give a binary answer, yes or no answer, it would be no.
Okay.
Because at some point, you're going to be on a radar somewhere, or you're going to hit up against something that says, this isn't clear, I'm not sure what you're doing. But But I think more importantly is not so much the words on the page, but the actions.
Yep.
So you've still got to do some stuff, right? And you've still got to show what you did and why you did it, and why that was okay, and why it worked, and when it won't work. So what am I doing? Am I contradicting myself here? Probably a little bit. As I'm speaking,
You agreeing with me?
I'm agreeing with you a little bit. Yes, maybe it delivers some growth, having a good one of those, but ultimately, I think it's what you do. Probably at the outset is more important.
Okay.
Because you've got no proof, you've got no evidence of what it is you've done in the past, no track record. So you've got to have something a little bit more detailed. But over time, then what will be looked at is, well, what really happened, and what were the outcomes.
But that's a slightly weird curve then, right? Because then it's very important at the start, then it becomes less important in the middle, and then when you get to institutional buyers again, it becomes really important again. It's unusual. So effectively, it's just always kind of quite important, right? That you, one, have it written down, it's clear, someone knows how to use it. It's used as a carrot for investors, but also a stick against the person that's written it, because they've got to manage it in line with it. And it gives everyone, up and down the chain, FCA, depository, custodians, portfolio manager, institutional buyers, and then the retail people at the end, the complete clarity of what that position of that product is, right? And therefore, the confidence that it exists in the market properly, within the right framework, within the right distribution strategy, within the right portfolio allocation, and therefore the end result is growth.
Hopefully.
And on that bombshell,
I don't know whether we agreed or disagreed there, but I think it's fundamental.
Yep.
And it's super important, and its importance varies over the life cycle of the product.
Yep.
But it can't be like anything looked at in isolation, which we keep saying.
Yep.
You've got to connect the dots, and what the fund does, how you design it, what it says it's going to do, what it actually then does, who does it, how you articulate that to different markets, who you distribute it to, how they access it, what it costs. All of these things only work if they're all looked at in tandem. So I think, did we agree in the end that investment objectives and policies drive growth? I'm going to say we did. I think that seems like a happier note to end on. So we'll say we agreed on that. And next time we'll delve into the next point on the roadmap to 10 billion and get into a little bit more detail on something that's a little bit less formal, perhaps, than an objective and policy.
fair enough.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Back next time for more detail on the roadmap to 10 billion.